All right, so this is our reminder video about how to tie your knot. So I'm going to do two different knots. I'm going to do one to start a thread and one to end a thread. It's basically the same thing. It's just a matter of whether you are starting in the fabric or starting around the fabric. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in. So right now I've got my needle threaded, a nice long Goldilocks needle, not too long, not too short, just right in the middle. This is going to be about one length of my arm, back and forth. So I got one arm this way and one arm this way. So it's 2 arm lengths, and then I fold it in half so it ends up being one. I've got my pinned fabric, and thankfully black thread shows up pretty well here. So I'm going to zoom in here and I'm going to show you how to get started. Let's get it auto focused. And you might hear the end of the school bell because this is the very end of the day. So you may hear some ding, ding, ding. If that's the case, we'll just pause. So I have some pins in here. I've got one here. I've got one on each side here to keep it nice and tight where I want it to be. And I've got my 3 finger spaced pins right there. So this is our opening. So we do not want to sew this shut. You're going to take your thread and your needle. And to start this off, what you're going to do is you're going to punch it through about 1/2 inch off of the end. That's about the width of your fingernail. So I'm going to take this, punch it through. Right next to my starting pin, I'm going to pull it all the way through until I have just a couple inches of tail, not too long. And I'm going to take that and I'm going to use that to tie. So I'm going to put my needle aside and I'm going to take these, since they're loose, and I'm going to make a loop. And in that loop, I'm going to cross this just a little bit closer so you guys can see what I'm doing. This is the really important part to make sure you're watching and paying attention. Let's let it focus. All right, so what I've done is that I take this one on top. This one comes around if it's underneath. It dives back through the loop and it pulls tight. If that looks familiar because it's the beginning of tying your shoe, you're right. It is a double knot. So just like a normal double knot. Once I get that one on there, it's not done yet because if I pulled that, that knot would come out. So I got to do it one more time. So I'm going to lay this one on top, take this one around and through the middle of your loop. Take both tails and you're going to pull, and now it's a double knot. So now when I yank on it, it's not going to go anywhere. So it doesn't matter how you tie the knot, as long as it doesn't pull out when you give it a nice gentle tug. If it doesn't go anywhere, you're good. If it slips out and it pops out of the fabric, then you got to start over. Once you get there, I'm going to do a couple of stitches so that I can take this out again. You're going to start to stitch. Remember, up, down, and you want it to be smaller than a kernel of corn. And you can always grab a piece of corn off of the cart. There's a box of it right on the top. But I'm going to do this with my needle so you can see what I'm talking about. So if I go grab that and I pull that out so you can see the stitches. When I pull the thread through, it's going to match the needle so you can see that each little tiny thread, even the spaces in between. So you've got stitch here, and the stitch on this side happens on the other side of the fabric. So no matter what, you're making a stitch on one side or the other. So if I pull that through, it's going to make a straight stitch. Even if it doesn't look straight, that's what it's called because it looks like footsteps. So step, space, step. When I get to a corner, if I need to turn, all I have to do is take my needle. Instead of coming here, I'm just going to come right here. I'm going to grab that, poke it through. And then I'm just going to start up what I was doing it in. So up, down, make sure your stitches are spaced so they're not bigger than a kernel of corn. If it is bigger, it is going to fall through. Now I'm going to pause the video and I'm going to go grab a kernel of corn. So hang on one second. And we're back. All right, so if this is a kernel of corn, and it is, I assure you it is, if I take a look at this on the narrowest part, that's from here to here, if it will not fit through that hole at this right there, then I'm okay. If it's going to squeeze through, then it's way too big. So if I'm taking a look right there, it's okay right there. If I look right here, it's okay right there. If you get too excited and you try to rush it and you do a big stitch like that, that kernel of corn, that becomes a hole right between the stitches, and that kernel of corn will slip right out. So what you're going to do if that happens is you can come back and you can stitch backwards to make that work. Hang on one second. I'm going to pause my recording. All right, and we're back. So I was talking about back stitching. So if you have this happen and you see that that is too big a stitch, all you have to do is start sewing backwards in the little stitches. And then once you get to a point where you think you can turn around, then you're going to come back the first way. I'm going to grab that. And then I ended right there. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come back the other way to get back to the end of my row. So basically I came this way, it went too big, I went back, and now I'm coming back this way. Up, down. And since I've stitched this a couple of times, that should fill that hole pretty nicely. All right, so let's say I'm to the end of my thread here. I'm going to come and I'm going to sew right up until I have about, let's hide this underneath so you can see. Let's pretend, because if my thread's longer, let's pretend I have that much thread left. That's about 1 finger worth, maybe a finger and a half. Don't go any closer than that. A little bit longer is always better, because this is a point where you have to have enough thread to wrap around and make some loops. Mine's going to be much longer because I just started sewing. All right, so what I'm going to do to end a thread is I'm going to take this and I'm going to punch it through the fabric. And this creates a loop. Once I create a loop, I'm going to go through the middle of that loop just like I did before. The catch here, the tricky part about this, and it's not really tricky once you know what you're looking for, is that now there's not another end to tie it to. So what you're going to do is you're going to go underneath the loop that you made, and you're going to double knot that way. So I'm going to come around, make that loop, dive through the middle of the loop, and if you feel like it's not tight enough, you can do it one more time underneath the stitch and around to the loop we just made, dive through the middle, tie it, and then once you're done, you give it a snip, and then you're ready to tie on your thread with this, what happened at the start of the video again. If you have any questions, please let me know, but I want you to try these on your own, because in the next part of this project, or if the next project where we sew, you are not going to be able to ask me to do this. You must do it yourself. So please make sure that you are practicing so that you know what to do. Thank you very much, and we will see you guys later.